50 Cent was shot 9 times. Most people know that part of the story. But what many people do not know is what was happening in Queens before those shots were fired. There were street alliances, music industry connections, a growing feud with Ja Rule and Murder, Inc., and a complicated relationship between 50 Cent and one of Queens' most powerful figures, Kenneth Supreme McGriff. So how did a young rapper from South Jamaica, Queens, end up in the middle of all of this? And was the shooting connected to the world he was trying to leave behind? Let's go back to the beginning. During the 1980s, South Jamaica, Queens was home to the Supreme Team, a powerful street organization associated with Kenneth Supreme McGriff. The organization became known for its involvement in drug trafficking and other criminal activity. At its peak, the Supreme Team reportedly had a large network of members and was making enormous amounts of money. Supreme eventually went to prison. But when he returned in the 1990s, the world around him had changed. Hip-hop was exploding. Queens was producing a new generation of artists, and Supreme began looking for a way to move from the streets into legitimate business. That is where the music industry became important. Supreme became connected with Murder, Inc., the label associated with Gotti and Ja Rule. At the same time, a young rapper named Curtis Jackson was trying to build his own career. The world would eventually know him as 50 Cent. 50 had already experienced life in the streets, but music offered him another path. He worked with Jam Master Jay, signed with Columbia Records, and began creating a reputation with his controversial song How to Rob. The record brought attention because 50 openly joked about robbing some of the biggest names in hip-hop. But behind the music, 50 still had connections to people from South Jamaica. One of the most important was Colbert Blackjust Johnson. Blackjust had a close relationship with Kenneth Supreme McGriff, but he also had a relationship with the young 50 Cent. According to the material in the original interview, Blackjust helped support 50 boxing and training. Another important figure was Charles Chaz Williams, also known as Slim. Chaz was connected to 50 and also had business ties with Supreme. That meant something very important. Long before the feud between 50 Cent and Murder, Inc. became famous, 50's world and Supreme's world were already connected through people they both knew. Then things changed. In 1999, Ja Rule was becoming one of New York's biggest young rappers. Around that time, Ja Rule had an incident involving Troy, a man who robbed him of his chain. The chain was eventually recovered through people connected to Supreme and Blackjust. But later, Ja Rule saw Troy with 50 Cent. That created suspicion. Ja Rule believed 50 had some connection to what happened. 50, however, viewed the situation differently. And from there, the tension between 50 Cent and Ja Rule began growing. What started as a street incident slowly became a major hip-hop rivalry. 50 Cent began attacking Ja Rule and Murder, Inc. Through his music, he wasn't backing down. And according to the source material, Supreme reportedly tried to stop the situation from becoming more serious. But 50 continued. The important thing is that 50 was not necessarily attacking Supreme directly. He was attacking people and a company connected to Supreme. That created a dangerous situation, because Supreme had relationships inside the Murder, Inc. camp, while 50 had his own connections to people close to Supreme. Then another story from Queens became extremely important. A man known as E-Moneybags became involved in a dispute connected to a car deal involving people associated with Supreme. The disagreement escalated. Eventually, E-Moneybags and Supreme's associate Blackjust became involved in a confrontation. Blackjust was shot and later died. That death changed everything. Blackjust wasn't just another person in the story. He had been closely connected to Supreme. And he had also been connected to 50 Cent. For 50, the loss was personal. For Supreme, the loss was reportedly even more significant because Blackjust was one of his trusted associates. The original material describes Blackjust as a bridge between two worlds that were increasingly moving apart, 50 Cent's world and Supreme's world. After Blackjust's death, E-Moneybags reportedly went into hiding. The tension in Queens continued. And meanwhile, 50 Cent was becoming more aggressive with his music. He released songs that openly challenged Ja Rule and Murder Inc. The feud was no longer just about music. It had become connected to old neighborhood relationships, street reputations, and people who knew both sides. Then came the moment that changed 50 Cent's life forever. May 24, 2000. South Jamaica, Queens. 50 Cent stepped outside near his grandmother's house and approached his parked car. Within seconds, gunfire erupted. 9 shots were fired. 50 was hit multiple times. But he survived. The shooting became one of the defining moments of his life and career. At the time, he was still trying to establish himself as a major recording artist. His debut album was being prepared, and he believed his breakthrough was coming. Instead, his life almost ended. And this is where the story becomes complicated. There have been many theories over the years about who ordered the shooting and why. The material connects the shooting to the environment surrounding 50 at the time, including his feud with Murder Inc., his connections in Queens, and the growing tension surrounding Supreme McGriff. But it is important to separate allegations and theories from what was actually proven. The shooting itself became a turning point. 50 survived, and instead of disappearing from the music business, he came back even stronger. His voice changed. His image changed. His story became part of his music. The man who had been shot 9 times would eventually become one of the biggest rappers and businessmen in the world. But the story surrounding Kenneth Supreme McGriff continued long after the shooting. Federal investigators eventually focused on Supreme's activities, including allegations involving drug trafficking, money laundering, and murders. Years later, Supreme was convicted on federal charges that included racketeering and 2 murders involving E-Moneybags and Troy Singleton. According to the source material, prosecutors argued that the killings were connected to revenge for Blackjust's death and attempts to prevent further retaliation. That makes the story even more complicated, because 50 Cent's shooting happened in the middle of a much larger world. A world involving Queens street politics, music industry rivalries, old friendships, new alliances, and people whose lives were already connected long before 50 became famous. The biggest question remains, did the world surrounding Supreme McGriff play a role in what happened to 50 Cent? There are theories, accusations, and different accounts, but not every theory has been proven. What we do know is that by May 2000, 50 Cent had already become deeply connected to a network of people from Queens. He had also become one of the loudest voices, challenging Ja Rule and Murder Inc. And then suddenly, 9 shots changed everything. 50 survived. His career continued, and the shooting became part of the legend that helped define him. But behind that legend was a much more complicated story. A story about how the streets and hip-hop were connected in Queens. A story about friendships that crossed different worlds. And a story about how one of the most famous rappers in history came dangerously close to losing everything before he ever reached the top. The 9 shots did not end 50 Cent's story. They changed it forever. And perhaps the biggest mystery is not how he survived. It is what happened behind the scenes before those 9 shots were fired.